Pursuant to the governor's stay-at-home, stay safe order, the city council will be conducting our meeting via Zoom this evening. So thank you for joining us. And the link has been provided to the public on our website and listed on the agenda. So with that, oops, let me find my my flag doesn't work. Oh, look, it does work with this. Well, not with this backdrop. Just bear with me a second while I remove my backdrop so that we can. And I just ask that all of you mute yourselves so that I don't get all kinds of feedback. So, and I'll lead us in the pledge. So, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And all right, we are to the approval of the agenda.
Mayor,
Rosa Pepe, do you have an amendment for us?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to amend the agenda, excusing Councilmember Diener from tonight's meeting.
For personal reasons.
For personal reasons.
Thank you. And that's added to the consent agenda, I would imagine.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, got a motion by Councilmember Rosa Pepe, second by Councilmember Klassen to excuse Councilmember Diener for personal reasons and add that as consent item D. Further discussion of that excusal? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the council, that's been added to the agenda. Any other additions, modifications to this evening's agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as modified.
Okay.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Klassen, a second by Councilmember Lucarelli to approve the agenda as amended. Further discussion of this evening's agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the amended agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. We are to our citizen comment period. And Mr. Krabby, I heard you earlier. You have some to comment on something that is on this evening's agenda. Would you like to? You've got 3 minutes if you'd like to address the council.
Sure. So tonight you folks will be voting on some changes to your recently adopted development code, housing code. And the first thing I'd like to do is just share our appreciation for the hard work that council or that staff has done and council in adopting this code. It brings the city's code standards to a more current suburban standard, and we appreciate that. We've been working hard with all of your planning staff to make some minor changes to make this adopted code a little bit more friendly to the terrain and the sensibilities of Port Orchard. Tonight, you guys will be voting on these changes, and I understand that there's some concern about adopting 3-car garage or allowing 3-car garages on lots that are only 60 feet wide. And I encourage you to do so. This is a typical standard in the Pacific Northwest. It looks good. It works well for our builders in McCormick Woods. And I think you can find numerous examples where, as long as the architecture is varied and the garage doors are set back and there's undulations, these larger or these 3-car garages do not look, they don't overwhelm the architecture of the homes. So I hope you will adopt this code and allow 3-car garages on 60-foot wide lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krabby. I also see Eric Campbell. They're here this evening. Do you wish to address the council on anything on this evening's agenda?
Yes, Mayor. I would like to speak to the same proposed ordinance that Mr. Krabby spoke about. And I also would really like to thank, the hard work that Nick Bond and his staff has put forward, and really wanted to thank the Planning Commission for all their hard work. I really, in all sincerity, think the R3 and zoning code and design guidelines really puts Port Orchard further ahead in most cities in the whole Puget Sound region. But I would like to just speak to, on the that having a 3-car garage on a 60-foot lot, and put just a little bit of context. You know, as a home builder in my previous career, we have built over 2,500 homes. And just to let you know, a 60-foot wide lot accommodating 3-foot garages, I mean, 3-car garages is allowed throughout the whole the 4 or 5 county region. The only area that does not allow that, it would be like Gig Harbor. But even Gig Harbor in the master plan community actually allows that 3-car garage. So it's in the, it's where they don't allow that is in the areas outside of the Harbor Hill, but in the areas within Harbor Hill. And like in our case, which is very similar to the Mccormick area, this facade has been allowed and currently is actually being built throughout by all the builders, Mainview, Garrett Homes, and Zetterberg with quite a bit of success. Excuse me, in the background. One other point I'd like to bring up is that the one benefit of having a 60-foot versus a 50-foot is that it allows, I'm so sorry, is that it allows the builder who's building a home with just a typical 40-foot facade to allow to put a 3-car garage onto it and allowing more street variety. So it's actually a good thing. It creates more variation in the neighborhood. Where a 66-foot wide plan or requirement, it really, you know, we're actually creating, you know, the impact is you have no greater probably homes facade looking out. You just have a larger setback. So my overall conclusion is that the additional 6 feet really does not create a benefit that would be noticeable to the community. So that's my comment, and I really appreciate you guys letting me speak tonight. So I'll go on mute and go get my dog.
Thank you. I see 2 other members of the public. I see Robert McGee. Would you like to address the council at this point in the meeting or later in the evening? Okay, didn't get a response, so I'm assuming it's later. And I see a Judy McCarthy. Are you wishing to address the council or just watch the meeting this evening?
She's just watching the meeting.
Okay, wonderful. All right, is that your mom?
Yes.
Welcome. All right, so with that, we will close the first citizen comment period, and I would look for a motion to approve this evening's consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda as modified.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Councilmember Klassen and a second by Councilmember Cacciardi to approve the consent agenda as amended. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda has been approved. We have a presentation tonight from John Powers from the Kitsap Economic Development Alliance. And John and I talked earlier today as John is on the verge of retiring. We're in the process of recruiting his replacement out there. And John has given many presentations over the years to the Port Orchard City Council. And I thought it would be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would be more appropriate that we talk about the CARES funding versus John's typical presentation. While that information is always valuable, I think the burning issue out there right now is our CARES money and how we're going to help small businesses. And I'm trying to work with Mr. Powers on a partnership that I hope to bring back to you in a couple of weeks to approve a contract to put to work some of our CARES funds. So Brandy, could you allow me to share my screen? And I emailed this document earlier today to the City Council, but just in case and for the public's benefit, I'll put this up on my screen, maybe.
You are going to have to help me.
I thought you were going to have to help me. Here we go. Share screen. I've got, it's on the bottom of my screen. It's all new. We're learning here. host is disabled. I may.
Brandy, you can make him a host by opening the participants tab and clicking on the more next to his name. And once he's a host, he can share.
Just go to his ... And he is, hold on, I know, make host. Do you want to change? Okay.
Yep, he's the
There we go. All right. So we're going to share. Here we go. Can you see that? Wonderful. Okay. So Mr. Powers, if you wouldn't mind, you want me to run through this because since this is my document. So.
Mr. Mayor, an opening remark.
No, you may. Please do.
First of all, I appreciate this opportunity. And in response to your introduction of, could you do something other than your routine report? I understood that as code for let's get right to the point tonight, Powers. I appreciate that. Thank you and all the council members for this chance to Zoom together. And with respect to Councilmember Lucarelli's mother participating or observing tonight, I just want to honor her with a big on Wisconsin, go Badgers.
Thank you, John, for those opening remarks. So 2 weeks ago, I talked to you about potentially taking $100,000 of our CARES funds and creating a small business grant. And as John and I talked, John, could you maybe, before I get too much farther, share your experience in the other grant and how cumbersome that has become?
You bet. So you might recall back in the second week of April, Governor Jay Inslee and the Department of Commerce announced that they were going to provide some state-funded relief to small businesses. The program was dubbed the Working Washington Small Business Emergency Grant. And in it, the governor originally proposed $5 million of his discretionary economic development fund to be distributed to small businesses across the state in a pro rata basis based upon population. It eventually was increased to 10 million. At the time, Kitsap was charged with basically providing back to the governor's office and Department of Commerce 58 some applications for small business grants up to $10,000 to pay for a variety of operating expenses to those small businesses that have been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and economic disruption. And of course, most businesses were, and many in fact had to remain closed during the initial periods, phase 1 and into phase 2 by governor's orders. So there was true impact, negative impact on the small business community across the state. So our job with the Kitsap Economic Development Alliance was to work with the Department of Commerce to post the application, to receive the applications, and we received over 600 applications in a 3-day window. So we were swamped with small businesses looking for relief. Our job was to winnow that down to 58 some applicants, and then the Department of Commerce and the governor would make the final selection. 36 of our pool of applicants were selected to receive up to $10,000 in small business operating grants. And so we started to work with those companies. We entered into an agreement with them. They needed to provide us certain information to make sure that they were eligible for the grant criteria. And then also produce evidence of expenses incurred during that period. It has been a long and I would say somewhat laborious process to get where we are today, which is several, I think 20 plus of those applicants under contract with their evidentiary documentation supporting their request for up to $10,000 in grant money. But again, because of the openness of the grant, it's taken a lot of time and a lot of effort to get in a position where we are about to fund businesses 2 months after the program began. So when you and I talked about putting together a similar program for the city of Port Orchard with some of your CARES dollars, I encouraged you to think about simplicity, to perhaps identify one area that could be eligible for reimbursement. And as most business people know, in a small business, there's 3 checks a month that keep your lights on. Well, 4 if you want to keep the lights on. But the first 2 are payrolls, second and fourth week of the month, and then the rent payment. Almost all small businesses are tenant occupiers of their premises and pay a monthly rent to some landlord. So we proposed that the city of Port Orchard lead a very streamlined grant process focused on reimbursing local small businesses within the city for the rent that they have incurred during the COVID-19 crisis period, which was established as a beginning point by the state of Washington as February 29th. Most have marked it around March 1st. But any rents paid during that period, whether it be March rents or April rents or May rents or now June rents or future rents into the fall, would be eligible to seek reimbursement from this particular program. So I think it's streamlined. I think it's easier to administer. I think it'll allow us to get funds into the hands of small business more readily than if we had just a general operating expense reimbursement platform. So you and I, in talking about this, you put together a very tight 1-page parameters of who can be served, what the eligibility requirements are, what the evidence would be to support their claim that they have in fact incurred at least $10,000 worth of rent or lease payments during the defined period. So that's where we are. We look forward to assisting the city if they choose to go forward with this program. We have experience having worked with the state program and having experience that I think has shaped our belief that we can do something a little more streamlined, deliver benefit into the marketplace a little more quickly. And frankly, even if this company that we might be granting an award to that is within the city of Port Orchard receives $5,000 or so for their rent expenses, that frees up other working capital to pay their utilities or their supplies or their other services that are necessary to keep the business afloat. So we're looking to help those small businesses retain their position, survive this pandemic crisis and economic disruption, and spring back to life as time permits. And we are prepared to partner with the city to provide the administrative arm of those awards. We've talked about you looking to our Economic Development Alliance and other partners, perhaps representation from the local Chamber of Commerce, to select what would be 20 applicants that would be awarded this grant out of what we anticipate will be literally 100, maybe 200 or more applications. So the demand for this grant application will oversubscribe, will be far in excess of the resources provided. But frankly, $100,000 shot in the arm into local small businesses is a great support from the city of Port Orchard, and we commend you for considering this opportunity.
Would you like me to, for the record, read the criteria here quickly? I know I've got it up on my screen.
I think that's appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Certainly. So obviously you need to be a Port Orchard business and have a business license in Port Orchard. Haven't been in business for at least 1 year from the date of the application. Have a physical location in the city of Port Orchard on or before March 1st. Have 15 employees or fewer. And that number came from our last meeting and that discussion in an attempt to simplify that. Engage in a type of business eligible to receive funding by the U.S. Small Business Administration. Ability to demonstrate a loss of revenue due to COVID-19, and a priority given to businesses that were required to close due to COVID, the governor's order. Your business has reopened prior to the date of the application, and if you answer yes to all of these above, your business may qualify. We're looking at up to 6 months of rent between April and September. $5,000 probably isn't going to cover 6 months of rent or even 3 months of rent, but we wanted to impact as many businesses as possible. Things that won't be allowed, obviously, because this is rent relief, wages and bonuses, operating expenses. If you're one of the lucky with 32 businesses that received the prior grant here that KEDA administered, you wouldn't be eligible. for this opportunity. You're not eligible for months that your landlord provided you rent relief. That's part of why we started with April. I know that some landlords were offering relief previously. And the landlord must not have an ownership in the business. We're really trying to keep our storefronts occupied and those businesses operating. And typically, someone who owns a building has an equity position, and not that they haven't been impacted, but you know, they have a vested interest to keep that storefront occupied. No home-based businesses. And John and I have talked about an online application, some sort of evidence of lease or declaration from the landlord. And we may require, if we have the question about ownership, some sort of supporting documentation may or may not be required. So questions, thoughts, things we may have missed?
I have a question, Mayor.
Certainly, Brasby.
I thought I heard John say, who's going to select the successful applicants?
Good question. I'm trying to not involve Noah and I or any council members in this process. We plan to, John and I have discussed a $2,000 fee to going to Kita for this, administering this for us. And it would be John and his staff and most likely the executive director of our Chamber of Commerce, Matt Murphy, would be selecting these or evaluating these applications and providing us a list.
And let me speak to that too, if I can, Mr. Mayor. When we were charged with administering the state's small business grant fund, we reached out to 2 community members that we felt had a good sense for small business dynamics. One, a retired banker from the Kitsap Bank, and then the other was Matt from your Chamber of Commerce, Matt Murphy, who had stepped up and volunteered, has a good background in small business. So it was Kathy and I and Jeff and Matt that sat down and poured through hundreds of applications to winnow them down to the number that Commerce asked us to submit. And I proposed to Rob that we engage Matt again on this assignment. He knows the Port Orchard business community well. I think he has a seasoned eye for business and those that are applying and have, I'll call it legs, have a legacy of operation and have a viability moving forward. One of the things we want to do is retain our businesses, keep their doors open, keep them moving forward and eventually expanding, and not looking to just, pass out relief to someone that might turn the lights off tomorrow. I like your provision. The company needs to have reopened during this application process. I think that's a good thing. And so we would propose that Kathy Kokos and I and Matt review the applications that are received. I would make it clear in our discussions that this is not to favor Port Orchard Chamber of Commerce members, many of which these small businesses may be, but to objectively look at the business application, make sure it meets the minimum criteria, and to make our decision accordingly. And of course, with just 20 winning or awarded applications, there's going to be many more businesses that apply that don't get that. And I understand the dynamics of being disappointed in that. We will do our best to be objective and winnow it down to a list of 20 that makes good sense to us and proceed accordingly.
And before I call on Councilmember Klassen to raise his hand, would you like me to stop sharing my screen? Or do you want me to keep my screen up? I see Fred shaking his head yes to keep my screen up. Okay, so I'll leave it up there for you guys to look at. Did you have a question or comment, Councilmember Klassen, or did I?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all.
Others wanting to give some feedback on this? Councilmember Chang.
I was a little concerned that it's only covering rent because we know a few businesses did get rent relief. However, it looks like the time frame is going through September, where and it could include months where they're not getting rent relief. So I think I'm comfortable with it just handling that. I'm also glad that Mr. Powers mentioned that there would be no preference to whether or not the businesses are or are not chamber members. I think that's important because not all businesses may be members of the chamber.
I understand the same holds true. They do not have to be partner investors in our alliance to be eligible or be given consideration. That is, we're looking at this with our best business objective eyes, trying to make the right calls, knowing that for every applicant, we might say, you know, we're moving forward into the pool of 20. There's probably going to be, you know, 50 left behind.
Okay. Councilmember Rosa, Pepe, you raised your hand.
I like it. It's nice. It's concise, very clear, and I think it's a good idea having John and Matt and the other members look at it. So keep it out of the city hands. And on a other note, John, you're going to be missed. So
You're very kind. As will so many people that I've had the great privilege of working with, but I'm not going anywhere. I love this community. I intend to stay active, but take a little more time for personal interests and family.
Thank you for that, Jay. Any other comments? Are you comfortable? And I can just have some head nods if you're comfortable with me proceeding with Charlie to work on a contract and get that into John's hands and likely bring this back in 2 weeks for us to get rolling on this. And maybe by the end of July, we'll be putting some money on the streets, or if not in August, for sure in August.
Mayor, I would just add the same comment that I made the last time we talked about this, and I think this is a great program, and it is certainly to our collective benefits to make sure our businesses stay viable and continue to generate sales tax, which in the long term is going to pay us back with flowers. So I think it's a great program. I'm glad we're able to do it.
Thank you for that, Mr. Klassen. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we will move. So any further questions about KETA and the Economic Alliance for Mr. Powers? I'm going to let him go back to his evening if that's okay. And
well, I would just add and echo the same as Jay. John, thank you. I know you're not going anywhere. I know I'm going to see you before you officially retire. But for the public record, it's been great working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. We appreciate all you've done.
I appreciate it. And just so you know, I read the governor's order this afternoon. I'm ready to comply.
Friday.
Like till Friday. It's good that you're equipped, because I hear you. So, all right.
Stay safe out there on Kitsap.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
Okay, we're going to move on to our public hearing is our next item. And this is an emergency interim zoning ordinance number 011-20, temporarily suspending approval and permit expiration and tolling processing procedure deadlines. So, Mr. Bond.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. On April 28th, 2020, the City Council adopted an emergency interim ordinance extending the expiration dates and deadlines for certain permit decisions, process requirements, and land use actions in response to the Governor's Proclamation 20-25 regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. The proclamation prohibited in-person meetings by local government agencies and restricted legislative bodies from taking action on any items that were not routine and necessary. Since the permit processing deadlines set by statute and the city's municipal code were not told by the governor's proclamation, and the City Council wished to prevent the expiration of development-related permits and applications, the Council approved an emergency ordinance to prevent active and pending approvals from expiring for a 6-month period. Per RCW 3670A390, the Council is required to hold a public hearing within 60 days of adoption of the interim ordinance. The staff recommendation is to hold a public hearing on interim ordinance 011-20.
Okay, I didn't bring my gavel into my office, but let's assume I have one, and I wrap my gavel and I open the public hearing. Is anyone from the public wishing to provide testimony on this emergency ordinance?
Mayor, you might just ask that if someone, it's possible they've not unmuted, just
Yes.
remind them they would have to unmute.
Yes, and then the only member of the public I see is Mr. McGee, and he, to this point, has not unmuted. So we'll give it a moment. And at this time, I will close the public hearing on this matter. So we will move on to our, there's no action intended, correct, Mr. Bond?
I was going to mention that now that we're potentially moving into phase 3, this ordinance may not be necessary to continue for the full 6-month period. And so I think at a future council meeting in July, we should probably discuss whether we should repeal this sooner than the full 6-month duration. I think that there are a number of, we've been accepting permits like normal, with the exception you can't come into the office. And I think it would be appropriate to probably lift this maybe effective August 1st, but let's talk about that next month.
Perfect. Thank you for that update on that. And so with that, we will move to our business items. And we tabled this first business item at our last council meeting, and it is approval of awarding the low bidder and authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement for the city's official newspaper. Clerk Reinerson, would you like to read the staff report?
Yes. So since approximately May 20th, the city's official newspaper, the Port Orchard Independent, has been exclusively published online. As a result, the paper does not meet the statutory requirements for a qualified paper under state law. In order to meet the city's statutory obligations, the city has also been publishing in the Kitsap Sun, a qualified paper of general circulation that is publishing both online and in print. RCW 35A.40.210 and 35.23.352 subsection 7 requires each city with a population of less than 20,000 to designate by resolution an official city newspaper and to select that paper via competitive bidding. The newspaper shall be of general circulation within the city or town and shall have been published regularly at least once a week. So the city did solicit for bids in May. We received 2, one from the Port Orchard Independent and one from the Seattle Times. It's my understanding that on June 9th, this item was brought forward to the City Council for approval. During that discussion, several council members voiced concerns with awarding the low bidder to a newspaper that does not have a qualifying circulation to our citizens and and possibly wishes to redefine the scope of the circulation. Discussion has also noted that the Port Orchard Independent is not a qualified paper insofar as it is publishing online only. The city attorney stated council may reject all bids and direct the mayor to modify the RFP to focus on obtaining clear distribution numbers to ensure that the selected paper has sufficient circulation within the city to constitute general circulation, which is pursuant to RCW 65.16.020. Due to the need for the city to emergent needs to designate a qualified newspaper of record and pursuant to the mayor's proclamation of emergency waiving procurement for COVID-19 related purchases, which has been ratified by the council may temporarily appoint a qualified newspaper of record without competitively bidding the appointment. So therefore, the current motion on the floor is, main motion was made by Councilmember Rosa Pepe and seconded by Councilmember Cacciardi to approve the Seattle Times as a low bidder and authorize the mayor to execute an agreement with the Seattle Times Company as the city's official newspaper in a form acceptable to the attorney. So we did provide alternative motion for the council for them to consider, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
And I'd like to also point out, I didn't realize that we'd been having this COVID fund for 90 days, and my emergency order has expired, and we didn't intend for it to expire. So I've signed a new emergency order today that is retroactive, and I'll be bringing that back before you because we're still not out of the this COVID So I'll bring that back to you in 2 weeks. So just wanted to point out it did lapse, but we've retroactively, I've put a new order into effect today, so that we are compliant with the aspects of the emergency powers. So with that, we have a motion on the floor that needs to be voted on. Councilmember Klassen, would you like to speak to that motion?
Yes, I would. And I would encourage the council to vote this motion down. There's been communication with our local daily publication that for one reason or another, they didn't submit a bid, but I think it would be valuable for us to reject these and request that the staff go back out. So I'm speaking against the motion, and I'm encouraging the council to vote the current motion down.
Others wishing to speak on the motion on the floor? Councilmember Lucarelli.
I believe I read that the Port Orchard Independent will actually be publishing in July, correct?
I don't know that.
Don't know.
Right, currently they are not a qualified newspaper. That's our challenge. And Councilmember Cacciardi.
Yeah, just a question now that Brandy's here too. A question I had brought up a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about this issue was, dealing with the lowest bidder. And is there some sort of metric here that speaks to the number of residents that you're actually reaching, right? If something's $2.30 a line and it's reaching 15,000 people, is that actually cheaper than something that might be $2.05 a line that's reaching 200 people? I don't know if that matters. I just want to make sure that the process is fair and just.
I think that's why that circulation, general circulation requirement is put in there. I don't believe it's low bid, but we can have a threshold for circulation, and that's what probably the recommendation in the alternative motion is that we redefine our RFP and put circulation requirements in it so that we don't get a newspaper that reaches 100 or 200 people. That's not reaching our community.
The statute allows for council members to make the circulation number a criteria going out for bid. Is that correct, Charlie?
Correct, yeah.
You guys have it under your powers to determine what that circulation number may look like, or what you may want to see, or at a minimum put for bid.
And the current RFP that we put out, the first RFP we put out, did not have that criteria in it. So I've got Councilmember Rosa, Pepe, and then I'll call on Councilmember Ashby.
I think in our last discussion, if I remember correctly, we had a lot of questions about the Kitsap Sun and why they had not. And Brandy, I didn't know if you had any more information on that. And the second thing was regarding circulation. I thought that we had also talked that most of our solicitations or responses to solicitations were coming through other avenues, that this circulation was more of meeting the state law, which we all agreed was kind of antiquated, considering how much is done electronically. And now I'll be quiet.
Yeah, I can answer that, Jay. We can chalk this up to COVID and furloughs. There's just not everybody's working in every business and out there, and so that's, things are falling through the cracks out there. It's tough to get people to we're dealing with this on a number level, from furniture companies to and it affects this too. There's not everybody's working at this time, and many people are being furloughed. And I did reach out to our lobbyist, and this has been on this issue has been on AWC's agenda for a number of years, and the newspaper industry lobbies very hard on the other side of it, and has been successful for a number of sessions to retain exactly what the status quo of what we have. So, Councilmember Ashby.
Yes, the other part of the discussion that I remember is the frequency of publications. And I believe that if we do reject the motion that's on the floor and go out to a new RFP, I would personally like to see it be for a daily publication and not a weekly publication. I'm remembering testimony from our department heads indicating that using a weekly publication delayed many of the processes that they needed to complete timely for our citizens.
And after, I'm going to let Charlie speak to that, and I'm not certain that we can, but go ahead, Charlie.
Right. So the one issue with that is that the qualifications for what constitutes a legal newspaper are set by statute, and the statute says to qualify, the newspaper needs to be published regularly at least once a week. And that provision, my understanding is, again, was lobbied by the newspaper industry to remain as a criteria. So for I believe the council and the city's hands are somewhat tied to require more frequent publication in order to qualify as a legal newspaper.
Okay. Councilmember Klassen?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment, Jay's comment, or follow up on Jay's comment. The publication or the official newspaper is used for other things than just, excuse me, soliciting bids. There's some official notifications that we're obligated to do, so it goes beyond simply looking for somebody to do a project. Trade magazines and things of that nature seems to be way more beneficial when you're looking for contractors than even the local newspaper.
Okay. Further discussion of the motion that's on the floor, which is to award to the Seattle Times.
Just
Councilmember-
one other question is, will this, if we reject this, will it impact our CDC department at this time with the delays?
We would need to, if we reject this, we will need to take, pass an alternative motion. One to put before you would deal with that issue, and we would temporarily designate the Sun as the temporary newspaper while we go through that process. So that's an option before you, but you need to take action for us to be able to do that. Further questions or comments? Okay, you have a motion that was made by Councilmember Rosa Pepe, seconded by Councilmember Cacciardi, to approve the Seattle Times as the low bidder and authorize the mayor to execute an agreement with the Seattle Times as our official newspaper. Is anyone wishing to approve that motion? Would they say aye? Hearing none. Any wishing to reject this, say nay.
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 Okay, that was rejected unanimously. Councilmember Klassen.
Mr. Mayor, I move to reject all bids and direct staff to modify the RFP to focus on obtaining clear distribution numbers to ensure that the selected paper has a sufficient circulation within the city.
Got a second by Councilmember Rosa Pepe, and our attorney is raising her hand. It's hopefully not a stop sign.
Thank you. Can we add to the motion as a friendly amendment the temporary delegation of a newspaper as the temporary newspaper of record? The existing newspaper of records designation will expire at the end of the month. That can be a qualified paper.
With the approval of the second, I would be happy to add that to the motion.
Okay, so I see that in the motion, at least that's published, delegating the Kitsap Sun as the temporary newspaper of record. Was that the intent of the motion maker?
Yes, if the second concurs.
I concur.
Councilmember Cacciardi?
Well, I just wanted clarification from our attorney. I thought she had asked that we delegate a newspaper as a temporary newspaper of record, not necessarily a specific newspaper, but perhaps I misunderstood her.
That is what I said, and the proposed alternative motion specifically referenced the Sun as a qualified paper with general distribution. But Councilmember Lucarelli had made a comment about the Port Orchard Independent publishing, and I'm not aware of that. So their qualified status may change. So it's council's pleasure.
I'm perfectly fine with the delegation of the Sun as a temporary newspaper again, if the second agrees.
I concur.
And then we'll go through a newly defined process to capture circulation and making sure that the newspaper is qualified in publishing. So further questions or comments on the motion before you? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries. The new motion carries. So we are on to item B, adoption of an ordinance amending residential design standards. Oops.
Mayor, so
Yes.
just for staff for clarification, so who's going to be setting the circulation standards? Is that going to be the mayor, or is that going to be the council's going to submit their I'm just looking for some sort of direction as to what is the circulation numbers that you're looking for us to include in the RFP as a minimum? Or is that something that's going to be, it's not quite sure where to go
How
from.
about you and I and Charlie talk
Okay.
maybe Friday? I've got AWC business the next couple days.
Okay, just making sure I didn't miss anything.
We're going to look at my calendar and cook up with Charlie and find a time that works for the three of us to talk about that.
Will do.
Perfect. Thank you for bringing that up. So we're on to item B now. Adoption of an ordinance amending residential design standards in Port Orchard Municipal Code, Chapter 20.32.020, 20.32.040, and 20.122.060. Mr. Bond, this is yours.
Thank you. The ordinance before you tonight came out of some conversations that the DCD had with Quadrant Homes and McCormick Communities back in November. Quadrant Homes was in feasibility on purchasing a portion of McCormick North, and they had identified some obstacles in our newly adopted code to developing some of their preferred product types in McCormick North. There were also a handful of changes that McCormick Communities had identified and they brought to our attention and asked us to consider. So we took the issues to the Planning Commission and spent a couple of months reviewing those issues, and they include adjusting the elevation requirements for detached houses on sloping lots or lots below the adjacent right-of-way under Port Orchard Municipal Code section 20.32020. They asked us to adjust one of the requirements in our code concerning locating primary access to a detached home in 20.32020. They asked us to consider allowing carriage units in cottage court developments above the garage structure under 20.32040. And they also wanted us to amend our requirements for front porch widths, the minimum width required on a front porch of a house in our developments. And that was a graphical change as well as a text change that we provided. One of the issues that the Planning Commission did not recommend, and which we discussed at length at our work study meeting last week, was what the minimum lot width would be for a house with a 3-car garage. And the code as it currently exists requires a 74-foot lot in order to have a 3-car garage. And McCormick Communities asked us to consider reducing that to a 60-foot lot width. The ordinance that is in your packet actually is a compromise that sets things at 66 feet, but as you heard in the testimony at the beginning of tonight's meeting, McCormick would really like to see that adjusted to 60. And so council tonight, if it chooses, could continue to discuss that issue and amend the ordinance prior to voting on it to adjust that if you see fit. In terms of a staff recommendation, I do recommend going with the 60-foot lot width. I've been studying this quite a bit over the last week, and I've sent some examples back and forth with some of the council members who have been asking questions about this matter. And I think that as Mr. Campbell pointed out in his comments, if you go with a 66-foot standard, you're essentially just going to increase the separation between houses, and the extra few feet that you gain, really, it's not usable space that you're gaining. It's a slightly bigger separation and a less efficient use of land. I also wanted to point out that one of the subdivisions we're getting ready to go to hearing on contains many 60-foot lots that are not 66 feet in the proposal going to hearing. And so in terms of the houses being built there, they would be a little bit smaller and a little bit lower on the assessed valuation side of things. And so potentially that would reduce future property tax revenue to the city. They have built several houses with 3-car garages on 60-foot lots, and that in parcels D, E, and currently under construction in parcel C. And that is allowed because those particular subdivisions are under the existing development agreement. And so this new subdivision that's going to hearing, which was not part of the same development agreement that provided the vesting to old county codes essentially would mean that this little part of McCormick Woods could not have something that's allowed in other areas of McCormick Woods. So their staff recommendation again is to amend the ordinance that is before you to 60 feet, but or at least to discuss amending it if you see fit. So thank you.
Okay. Council members, discuss this. Councilmember Ashby.
Yes, I have a question for Nick. The motion for consideration that was included in the staff report does not include the section for the three-car garage. Are you suggesting that we have a separate motion for the three-car garage, or make it part of the current motion, the proposed motion?
I think you could, and Charlie may have to correct me here, but I believe once there's a motion to approve this, can you make a second motion to amend a particular portion of it? Or do you have to, Charlie, do you have to amend the ordinance that you're voting on as part of the initial motion?
I'm trying to think of what's cleanest. You could do it either way. In the making of the motion, you could modify it, but it might be faster to make the motion as presented and then have someone make an amendment to that motion to add that language. Either way would work.
So the language that would be needed, I believe, under section 5 of the ordinance, you would be changing the number 66 to the number 60 in the 4th line of the table under that section.
So in that case, if that were a change that the moving party wanted to make, they could say, you know, I move to adopt an ordinance amending residential design standards as prepared with the exception of, and then change the language there.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Okay, I've got a couple of other council members that want to address this topic before maybe we get a motion. Would that be, or would you prefer to do it
Well, I
after?
was going to do the motion and then we can discuss. If you want to do it the other way, we can.
Perfect. So make your motion, please.
Okay. I move to adopt an ordinance amending residential design standards in the Port Orchard Municipal Code chapters 20.32.020, 20.32.040, and 20.122.060 with the amendment of section 5 under 20.139.015 so that the third line would read total lot width 60 feet or greater, amending the 66 feet to 60 feet for a three-car garage.
That's a minimum lot width.
Minimum lot width, correct.
And I think I heard a second by Councilmember Cacciardi. Okay. And Councilmember Cacciardi, did you raise your hand earlier to comment on this?
I was simply going to do what Councilmember Ashby did. It was to get the motion on the floor so we could have further discussion. Thank you.
Okay, as the maker of the motion, do I get to talk first?
Certainly. You're a council member. You're never wrong.
I know. Well, it's my understanding that the maker of the motion gets to speak first.
You
So,
certainly do.
thank you. What I want to say regarding this particular issue is I've been privileged to live in the city of Port Orchard, and I was privileged to purchase my home when we were not concerned about increasing our density, when most of the homes were being serviced with septic tanks and not a sewer system. So I know that a lot of our older homes have more spacious land provided for them. I took a drive yesterday out to this section of McCormick Woods, and I drove around a area, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of it, but the street was Olivine, Olivine, and there were homes there under construction, and there were homes there that were already being lived in. And that subdivision was primarily homes with 3-car garages. And it made me realize that as a council person, I have to think to the future, and I have to think to the future of our families. And these homes with 3-car garages allow storage for bicycles, they allow storage for boats or RVs or golf carts. Because our lots are so small, it's hard to put storage units on them. Our lots are so small that I would not want to have to ask developers to take a part of their subdivision and provide storage units there. It just seems to me that these are the homes of the future. And I really wanted to compliment the builder in that particular section for the way they had designed the homes that were going in there and the construction of the homes that were going in there. We are faced as a council with increased density. We're anticipated to double in our size in the next 20 years. And I would like to see families be able to continue to live in single family residences and not have to live in apartment buildings. And if those are going to be on smaller lots, and if they need a 60-foot lot to put a home with a 3-car garage, I can definitely support that. If we go to 66 feet or 74 feet, the footprint of the house is just going to get bigger because they're going to use the land available. If for some reason we wanted to make the home smaller, we would need to make the setbacks greater. And so my original thought when I took this drive up there is I was thinking it, and it proved when I drove through there, the homes with the 2-car garage did not appear to me to be any bigger than the homes with the 3-car garage. So I'm not sure why we would be offended by 3-car garages. So I just really supported the builder to provide homes that families can raise families in. I appreciated it very much. And I support putting these types of homes on 60-foot lots.
Councilmember Cacciardi. You need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. My goodness, you think we'd be experts by now. I was just going to add the fact that it's been nice that, this example already exists in our community. It's been happening in McCormick Woods for some time. So it's not something that we're really guessing about. We've seen it happen. And I just want to add to the fact that, what we've done here the last few years in our council, also with regards to architectural standards, I think is what's keeping us moving the city in that type of direction where design and the architecture is important to us. And I think the product that we're getting is a derivative of that. And so I would support the 60-foot lots.
Okay. Others? Councilmember Lucarelli.
I also drove through McCormick Woods before I left, and I did think that the design was appealing. And I agree with you that an extra 6 feet is really not going to make a substantial difference. And Beck, that was very well spoken, that we are really looking to the future. And I agree with what you've said. I agree that that is a great way to keep families in single family residences by having the storage that's really needed. So I'm going to agree with the 60 feet.
Okay. So other council members wishing to comment on this? Councilmember Rosa Pepe.
Nick, I have a question on the section 5 table where it says 40 feet up to 66 feet for 2-car garages. I assume that stays the same, and then we would need to change it to greater than 60 feet up to 100 feet. Is that correct?
Yes, you're correct. That was me thinking on the fly, which I should have written something down before the meeting.
Okay. Is the motion we have on the floor appropriate to capture that comment?
I think you can consider that a friendly amendment, maybe. Is that?
Councilmember Ashby and Councilmember Cacciardi, do you agree with that? You're both muted.
I do. I wouldn't mind our attorney weighing in and making sure that's okay, or should we take and formalize it in the form of another amendment?
I think we should do it as a formal amendment.
Okay. That somebody, Councilmember Rosa Pepe, you raised your hand. You raised the issue. We want to make the motion.
Sure, I'd like to make the motion on changing section 5, the third line down, decreasing it from 66 feet to 60 feet up to 100 feet for a 3-car garage.
I'll second it.
Okay, a motion by Councilmember
Actually,
Rosa.
I think that you meant to say the third line down says 40 feet up to 66 feet, and it should say 40 up to 60. And then the fourth line down should say greater than or equal to 60 feet up to 100 feet is a 3-car garage.
I will restate then if that's acceptable with the mayor.
Okay, I think what Mr. Bond said is exactly what you said.
That's what I heard.
So, motion and a second. Mr. Bond is not a council member. No. So, discussion of the amendment. Okay, we wish to vote on that amendment. So, all in favor of the amendment on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
You opposed to the amendment, say nay. Hearing none, the amendment is approved. Further discussion of the main motion.
So that's that was the vote for the second amendment. Now you need to vote on the first amendment.
There is no first amendment. There's just a main motion on the floor.
Oh, that's right. She captured in the first motion. Sorry. Yep.
Okay, we're back to the main motion. Any other comment? Okay, all in favor of the main motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. You know, we had an even number tonight. This was the one I thought maybe controversial.
Oh, darn, I was going to bring that up, Mr. Mayor.
Didn't get to
I
vote.
appreciate you reminding me of this issue, that since we are an even number, the mayor was hoping to be able to vote, but I told him that I would encourage us all to be unanimous so that he wouldn't get the opportunity to vote on anything. So,
All right, I see how you guys are. So we're on to item C now, and adoption of a resolution approving a utility payment plan. And this is Mr. Crocker's item.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Governor Inslee has issued multiple proclamations requiring municipal utility providers to work with customers experiencing financial hardship due to COVID-19. Most recently, by Proclamation 20-23.4, released on May 29th, the governor required utility providers to develop a COVID-19 customer support program. Again, the intent of the proclamation is to ensure that residential customers who experience economic hardship as a result of COVID-19 will continue to receive assistance even after the declared emergency concludes. The City Council adopted Ordinance 009-20, which delegated authority to the Finance Director to waive late fees, penalties, and make payment arrangements under certain conditions. At the time of the adoption, the payment arrangement policy was underdeveloped due to the limited resources and staff time. The final policy was intended to come back to the full council for approval. The policy has been discussed at the Utility Committee with some minor suggestions incorporated, which will apply to the water, sewer, and storm utility accounts of the city. Tonight before you is the utility payment plan policy, and staff recommends that the City Council approve the resolution approving the payment plan policy as attached in Exhibit A.
Okay, Councilmember Lucarelli.
I move to adopt a resolution approving the utility payment plan policy as presented in the resolution.
Second.
Yes. Second by Councilmember Rosa Pepe, the main motion by Councilmember Lucarelli. Anyone wishing to discuss this item or provide comment? I think it's
just
pretty
a quick question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
This policy will go beyond COVID, or is this supposed to be just during COVID?
This policy will go beyond COVID. This policy addresses the governor's directive to address it for COVID, but this council has already contemplated utility payment plans prior to COVID. And so in the policy, we identify that it is targeted for customers experiencing economic hardship in an emergency, a locally, federally declared emergency, or other extenuating circumstances. So it's very limited, but it can go beyond just this event.
But it would be only available during whatever the current emergency is.
So the policy contemplates the current pandemic, any declared future emergencies, or other extenuating circumstances that affected the utility customer services ability to pay.
So extraordinary circumstances could be just, I lost my job and I need help.
I think where this came up before and where we originally started contemplating other arrangements, and again, we set some code up about a year ago, is during the hurricane, utility customers call and say, hey, we were impacted by the tornado. So that could be an extenuating circumstance that's not necessarily a nationally declared emergency, but we could offer some payment arrangements for those impacted by that. The intent of this policy is not to finance our utility clients or our utility customers. And specifically, there's a maximum term length of 6 months in the policy unless approved by the finance director under the longer term arrangement. Now that was required due to the governor's directive asking us for longer term arrangements for those customers that have a larger financial burden. So we put some parameters around that, all customers can qualify for the 6 months under the declared emergency. But if you have a balance of $800 or more, you can qualify for a longer term, but no longer than 12 months.
I think another example where the council has directed us to make payment arrangements to have been federal shutdowns. We have so many of people in our community that work for the federal government, and from time to time, Congress hasn't been able to pass a budget on time, and we start having shutdowns, and so it isn't always a tornado or a pandemic event, but I think this is intended for not, because I've just lost my job. It's bigger events that are affecting our whole community.
Correct. Yeah. Another example I would use is if a customer had a utility account and say they left for Arizona for 3 or 4 months and they had a pipe burst. And by the time they got back and we caught it, they ended up having a substantial water bill, maybe $5,000 to $10,000. That might be an extenuating circumstance where we want to work with that customer to develop payment arrangements for them to tackle this larger than normal bill.
Thank you.
Heaven forbid.
Yeah, heaven forbid. That's right. Other questions or comments? Okay, with that, you'll be voting on the resolution approving a utility payment plan policy. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is approved. We're on to item D, approval of adoption of a resolution approving an interlocal agency agreement with Department of Commerce related to COVID-19 CARES Act funding. Mr. Crocker.
Thank you, Mayor. Due to COVID-19, the City of Port Orchard has spent significant unbudgeted financial resources to combat and respond to COVID-19 for its employees, citizens, and businesses. Costs incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to COVID-19 during the period of March 1st, 2020 through October 31st, 2020 are eligible for the CARES Act funding. The City of Port Orchard is eligible for up to $431,700 of CARES Act funding administered through the Department of Commerce. In order to pursue these funds, the city must execute this interagency agreement with Department of Commerce in the form required by Department of Commerce. Staff recommends the City Council approve the resolution approving this interagency agreement with Department of Commerce as it relates to COVID-19 CARES Act funding.
Okay. And Councilmember Rosa, Pepe, go ahead.
Mayor, I would move to adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an interagency agreement with Department of Commerce related to the COVID-19 CARES Act funds for local governments in Washington State.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Guicciardi, main motion by Councilmember Rosa Pepe. And it's our plan to bring back, as we figure out ways to spend this money, eligible expenditures, to bring contracts like the one we're talking about with KETA. We're making a number of technology improvements to city so that we can conduct our virtual meetings, and modifications to workspaces so that we can be compliant with the social distancing requirements that have come about as related to COVID. So those are the big ticket items that we're contemplating, and we'll be bringing back those expenditures to the council to approve those at future dates. This action just allows us to accept the money from Commerce and approve the agreement with them. So, other questions or comments related to this? Not seeing any. So with that, you'll be voting on adoption of a resolution approving the interagency agreement with Department of Commerce related to COVID-19 CARES Act funding. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Excuse me, I'm getting a frog here. All right. Back to our agenda. Item E, adoption of a resolution approving a contract with Land Expressions LLC for the 2020 McCormick Village Splashpad Retrofit Project. Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Your Honor, council members. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
On May 15th and May 22nd, 2020, the Public Works Department published a request for qualifications for landscape architectural services for the 2020 McCormick Village Park Splashpad Retrofit Schematic and Ad-Ready Design Project. By the May 29th deadline, 3 statement of qualifications were received. Upon review and scoring of the statement of qualifications by staff, the Public Works Department selected Land Expressions LLC for the project. On June 12, 2020, a viable and satisfactory proposal from Land Expressions LLC was received for the project, which was design development and ad ready, because we already had kind of a conceptual design, in the amount of $40,880. Staff recommends adoption of a resolution of resolution 020-20, thereby approving contract number C056-20 with Land Expressions LLC for the 2020 McCormick Village Park Splashpad Retrofit Design and for design development and ad ready design project in the amount of $40,880 and documenting the professional services procurement procedures.
Councilmember Klassen.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 020-20, thereby approving contract number C05620 with Land Expression LLC for the 2020 McCormick Village Park Splashpad Retrofit Design Development and Ad Ready Design Project in an amount of $40,880 and documenting the professional services procurement procedures.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Rosa Pepe. Sure would have been nice to have that splash pad on today. We're not using a whole lot of water in it today, but it is part of the agreement with the city of Bremerton because of the large amount of water that it uses and the moratorium that we had unfortunately had to impose for a period of time out in McCormick Woods. So this is a necessary expenditure to be in compliance with that agreement. So Councilmember Ashby.
Yes, this is for Mr. Dorsey. Do we have the staff that can maintain this recycling equipment once it's installed? Or are we going to have ongoing maintenance?
No, it's basically a water treatment system. So we have two current operators at that level.
It is a use of staff time. It's a good point, but it's a necessary evil to operate this.
Right. I just wondered if we were going to have a separate contract
No.
And we're not, we have people on staff that can maintain it. Thank you.
Yes, we do.
At some point, when well 13 is on, and depending what happens, well 12, we may end up needing a full-time water treatment operator
Okay.
as required by the Department of Health.
Councilmember Chang, you raised your hand.
Yes, I like the idea of recycling the water and reusing it because we know that it's a very large water bill. But now, given the current situation, how certain are we that the recycled water is safe for reuse? As I understand it, it's water that potentially falls on people and their mouths and their faces. So would the recycled water be used for the same purpose?
System's been going to be approved by the Department of Health, so it will need to.
Yeah, it's a design system that meets health standards.
Yeah. Councilmember Klassen?
Oh, I was just going to add, it's not a whole lot different than what they do for swimming pools. So they recycle swimming pool water and filter it and disinfect it and reuse it.
Other questions or comments? Good questions. And hopefully this summer we get to turn this thing on, even though we're not recycling water, but not at with the current restrictions, we would attract way too many people. With that, you'll be voting on an adoption of a resolution approving a contract with Land Expressions LLC for the 2020 Mccormick Splashpad Retrofit Project. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We will move on to item F, adoption of a resolution approving a contract with Advanced Diving Services, Inc. for the 2020 in-service cleaning, inspection, and potable water storage tanks cleanings by commercial divers. Mr. Dorsey, we've had the Nick Bond show here for a couple of weeks, and now that tonight's kind of turned into your show. So go ahead.
Okay. So on May 6th, 2020, the city established a list of qualified contractors from the 2020 MRSC Small Works roster, which is attached, for main category, site improvement, repair, and maintenance, water facility construction and maintenance. And then the subcategory was potable water tank inspection, reservoir cleaning, painting and caulking, underwater video inspection to perform the 2020 in-service cleaning and inspection of our potable water storage tanks, utilizing a commercial diver. On May 15th, 2020, and pursuant to Resolution 019-17, the city's Public Works Department emailed a request for proposal for the 2020 in-service cleaning and inspection of potable water storage tanks, utilizing commercial divers to 3 members of the roster. 2 bids, including applicable tax, labor, and equipment, materials, and fee, were received prior to the June 12th, 2020 proposed deadline. We had one from Water Solutions for $12,950 and one from Advanced Diving for $13,539.98. Water Solutions was deemed non-responsive, and so we went with the MRSC bidder responsibility checklist and determined that Advanced Diver Services bid of $13,539.98 was the lowest qualified bid. And we did confirm that the bidding requirements for Public Works have been followed. So staff recommends that the City Council adopt Resolution 022-20, thereby approving contract C057-20 with Advanced Diving Services, Inc. for the 2020 in-service cleaning and inspection of potable water storage tanks utilizing commercial divers in the amount of $13,539.98, with the contract term beginning June 23rd, 2020 and ending August 31st, 2020.
Councilmember Lucarelli.
I move to adopt resolution number 022-20, thereby approving contract number C057-20 with Advanced Diving Services, Inc. for the 2020 in-service cleaning and inspection of potable water storage tanks utilizing commercial divers in the amount not to exceed $13,539.98.
Councilmember Klassen.
I'll second it.
Okay. Got a motion by Councilmember Lucarelli, a second by Councilmember Klassen. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Dorsey? Councilmember Klassen.
Yeah, I'm going to beat Mr. Chang to the punch on this one, and I'm assuming that we have standards for these divers and their preparation and cleanliness before they start swimming around in our potable water tanks. And
Yeah.
second is just a comment that for the council that has never really seen the videos of this, it is quite interesting if Mark would share that and make it available to see the inside of our tanks and watch them swim around.
Yeah, we make them take a shower the day before they go in, so I think we're good. No, there's health department, very stringent health standards, and that's why this is a specialty.
Okay, and we'll make a movie night out of it, John.
Yeah, I'll bring the popcorn.
Okay. Councilmember Lucarelli, did you have a comment?
I would love to see the video of these guys swimming around in there. I think it would be fascinating.
Okay.
Well, generally you don't see them swimming around, but you get to see inside of the tank. So,
Well, I'd like to see them in there too. I think it would be
well, now
fun.
you're talking a production crew, so that might be a bit much.
Can't they turn the camera on themselves?
Selfies.
All right. Other comments or questions? Hearing none, you will be voting on adoption of a resolution approving a contract with Advanced Diving Services for the 2020 service cleaning and inspection of the storage tanks utilizing commercial divers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is approved. So we are on to item G, adoption of a resolution to apply for a grant funding for the BRB program managed by the State Recreation and Conservation Office for the 100% design of culvert replacement on Bay Street. So, Mr. Dorsey, maybe you can tell us what that acronym is when you give your staff report.
I can, and I'm going to go better. For brevity, I will read the first staff report into the record. And because the next item 7H is basically the same request just for a different culvert, I don't think there is need to go into the detail. One culvert's on Bay Street, the other one's over off of Sydney for Ruby Creek. We're requesting the same thing on both. So unless somebody wants me to read the second one specifically into the record when we get to that. So for item 7G, the City of Port Orchard Public Works Department proposes to replace an existing drainage culvert on Bay Street. The culvert is located near the intersection of Bay Street and Arnold. It's Annapolis Creek. The existing wooden box culvert has had some structural failures resulting in sinkholes on Bay Street and is also a known barrier to salmon migration. While the city has done some repairs to fix the sinkholes and prevent further degradation, a more permanent solution is needed for replacing the structure. It is unclear how long the existing culvert will be able to support traffic and maintain structural integrity. In 2018, the city conducted a 30% design analysis for this project to determine roughly what it would cost to replace the structure. Remember, that was that contract with Reed Middleton. Currently, estimates fall between 1.3 and 4.7 million for the total design and construction of that. On May 29th, 2020, the city applied for a Recreation and Conservation Office RCO grant through the Brian Abbott Fish Barrier Removal Board program to fund 100% design of the culvert replacement project. If awarded, the funds will be available to the city July 1st, 2021. Design due diligence assessments and permitting are anticipated to begin September 30th, 2021, with construction anticipated to begin May 30th, 2022. Cost estimates for this project are $500,000. A grant match of 15% or $75,000 is required from the city if the grant is awarded. With council's authorization to proceed with this project, match funding is available in the storm drainage budget, or will be in the 2021-22 biennial budget cycle. Staff recommends the city council adopt a resolution thereby authorizing the mayor and designees within the Public Works Department to apply for grant funding for the BA FBRB program managed by RCO, to commit to a grant match from the city, which is the 15%, and to execute all documentation necessary to effectuate the grant and pursue this project to complete 100% design for the Bay Street Annapolis culvert repair. And a side note is, again, for scoring for additional grants, if we can get this design and get it to a shovel ready, we'll be in much better position to then go after additional grants for the construction phase.
Councilmember Chang.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt a resolution thereby authorizing the mayor or designate to apply for grant funding from the BAF BRB program by the RCO, to commit to a grant match of 15% from the city, and to execute all documentation necessary to effectuate the grant to fund 100% design of the culvert replacement for the Bay Street Annapolis Creek culvert repair.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Rosa Pepe, main motion by Councilmember Chang. Anyone wish to ask Mr. Dorsey any additional questions? I think I had a conversation with Mr. Klassen today, and he was wanting to know why this grant is only for design and the other one is for design and construction, and because this project is far more expensive than the other project is. So that's why we're taking this one in smaller bites. So Councilmember Klassen.
I was going to bring it up when we get to the next one. There is a difference between we're designing a culvert for this area and we're designing a bridge for the other, and logic just doesn't fit with me. Why, appreciating we're designing one, but the estimated cost is so much higher on this culvert versus a bridge on Sydney, but I'm not an engineer, so.
If you remember, though, we had extensive, that's why there's such a range, and a preferred alternative I don't think has been selected to this point, whether we're going to, how far we're going to go up into that estuary. And there's homes potentially that get bought in that area or not, and it runs up into the county, and whether the county partners with us. Bobby, it was, how long ago? It seems like yesterday or 6 months ago, but it was probably 2 years ago when we talked about that particular issue. And that's why there's just a huge range. This could be a $4 million project or $1.5 million project, depending on how far we take it.
And it's important to understand that this also interfaces, one is we're dealing with a shoreline environment, not a small creek. So the next one that we're looking at, both the design and construction, it's almost like a standard out of the box box culvert that Fish and Wildlife, prepares. This one on Annapolis Creek, it has the potential to have to deal with the old wooden box culvert that's there, the culvert that's also further upstream. It's in a shoreline environment, and it also has to be designed such that it is incorporated either before the Bay Street pedestrian pathway or after the Bay Street pedestrian pathway. So it's a much more elaborate design, much more costly project.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember Cacciardi.
Just a quick question on the timetable. We're going to be coming into budget season here pretty soon. And if we're able to start this design work on July 1st, 2021, and obviously there's a big delta between the design costs and then, well, we don't really know what the construction costs will end up being until this is done. But is it realistic that we could actually begin construction in May the following year?
Noah is a magic worker. He is going to find dollars somewhere. I keep saying that's a few meetings in a row I've said that.
How this works, and remember, we did it. It's been tried and tested. We did it with Tremont. So remember, with Tremont, even though we knew we had the funding coming in, we didn't put it into the budget. We had to do it as a budget amendment because we don't want to put something in the budget that isn't 100% obligated. So we'll follow a similar process on this, where we can, whether it actually gets into the budget for this match money, we'll probably wait, and it'll be part of the budget approval process as a supplemental item, but we won't actually put it in the budget until we're actually awarded the money, council accepts the grant, and we know exactly what the number is. So we're not going to bake anything into the budget and except through an amendment process.
Yeah, no, I guess I just was more speaking to the May date of actually starting construction. If that just seems like a tight window between knowing what the final design is and then.
And I agree completely. I mean, again, this is so far out there that I don't want to get too far ahead of. It's almost like, we're trying to manage this connecting, years out as well. So let's just get the RCO, be able to submit the grant applications, and then we'll just go from there.
And Noah, as you know, does an excellent job building the elaborate spreadsheets we've got budget for one, but then we've also got the obligation spreadsheets that he creates. So when we do things like this, he plugs dollars into that obligated spreadsheet so that we're not trying to spend these dollars 2 and 3 times when we've, got these applications out there. So I'm confident that Noah will track this very efficiently. So I saw a hand by Councilmember Klassen.
Yeah, and it's just one other comment that I confirmed today with talking with the mayor that these are state dollars. So the proverbial clock doesn't start ticking on us to complete a project once we start using these funds to design. So
unlike federal money.
Unlike federal dollars, yes.
Right. Councilmember Ashby, did you have a comment or question? No?
No, we had a similar discussion today at the Transportation Committee in that there are, we've got projects out right now for grants, and we have potential other projects that we want to put out for grants. But the question is, if we're awarded the grant, do we have the resources to go into construction or to actually accept the grant? It's a conversation we had earlier today. So yeah, I guess it can't hurt to ask, and then have a good problem trying to figure out how to come up with funding to actually complete the project.
Exactly. And I want to remind you that we did the exact same thing when we applied for the Tremont funding, regional funding, which we didn't get anything out of, but the screening process for PSRC and KRCC required the same thing, that there was a resolution that the city adopted committing themselves to some future grant match long before we even knew what we had received. So this is just really a procedural matter that allows us to apply for grants.
My one other question, have we applied for this grant before, and do we have any idea what our potential for success is?
No and no.
It's uncharted territory, but these are the things we need to be doing because we can't solve these problems with just our local dollars.
Yeah, this is just your staff, Zach digging into all potentials for these sorts of projects. Chris Hammer's been really digging deep on all sorts of different transportation options. So, when I came here in 2008, we had an actual grant writer that I don't think we ever got any value out of that. So your staff is doing a good job writing grants.
All right. With that, I don't see any other questions. You'll be voting on adoption of a resolution applying for a grant with the State Department of Recreation and Conservation for 100% design of a culvert replacement on Bay Street. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hear none. So the resolution is approved. To item H, adoption of a resolution to apply for a grant managed by the State Department of Conservation Office to remove a culvert on Sydney Road. Mr. Dorsey, this is you.
Okay, and we already had a fairly robust conversation. So as Councilman Klassen pointed out, the difference here is this is for design and construction. It's also for the Ruby Culvert, which is about midway between Berry Lake and Sedgwick on Sydney. It's an existing CMP culvert that's failing. We've got a water line and a sewer line that run over that. So this is a needed project, not only from the standpoint of supporting those utilities, but it's also needed for the road improvements that we're going to have to do. And we can't do anything to that culvert that extends its life because it's fish bearing. And so we couldn't get a permit to try to modify that. So this is a replacement with a standard Fish and Wildlife Squamish Tribe approved box culvert that will extend the life, allow us to develop that corridor from a road transportation and a utility standpoint.
Okay. Councilmember Lucarelli.
I move to adopt a resolution thereby authorizing the mayor or designee to apply for grant funding from the BAF BRB program managed by the RCO to commit a grant match of 15% from the city and to execute all documentation necessary to effectuate the grant to remove the Sydney Road culvert at Ruby Creek and replace it with a bridge.
Seconded.
Got a second by Councilmember Klassen, main motion by Councilmember Lucarelli. Any discussion of this second grant? Councilmember Klassen.
Just a quick, I got a little confused on your comments there, Mark. We're replacing an existing culvert with a 30-foot span bridge. At least that's what it's envisioned. Is that correct?
Well, a 30-foot span bridge is basically a prefab box culvert.
Okay, so
It's
I guess it's semantics. It's similar to what they did on Highway 16 out in the Gorst area then.
Yeah, I mean, box culvert, bridge, it's up to interpretation of what you want to call it, I think.
Okay, clarification, when you specify a span bridge here, in my mind is a very short Tremont bridge versus a box culvert, which is not that it's a big deal. I'm just trying to get clear in my mind what you're talking about.
It's basically, again, it depends on who you talk to, whether they call it a bridge or a box culvert. The important thing is that it doesn't have a bottom. It's a three-sided bridge or it's a three-sided culvert because it has to do with having gravels that are approved for fish passage on the bottom.
So what we were just talking about down in Annapolis, is that a three-sided or four-sided?
That's a three-sided as well.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Hearing none, you'll be voting on adoption of a resolution to apply for a grant managed by the RCO to remove a culvert on Sydney Road. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is approved. To our last business item, which is approval of a noise exemption permit for Kristen Waters for 4th of July celebration. Clerk Reinerson.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council. So Kristen Waters contacted the city in June asking to be granted a noise exemption permit. She will be holding a celebration on her private property of 4.5 acres at 4801 Glenwood Road Southwest within the Port Orchard city limits. The event will start around 5 p.m. and last until 1 a.m. on July 4th, 2020. She has paid for 3 bands and estimates around 35 to 40 people in attendance. She had the same celebration last year, but was told by the Port Orchard Police Department to get a noise permit for this year. Ms. Waters noted she contacted her neighbor, Cynthia Silvernail, who has given her approval. On June 18, 2020, staff spoke to Ms. Silvernail, who indicated she had no issues with the event on her neighbor's property. City Clerk notified Ms. Waters that if Kitsap County is not in phase 3 of the governor's phased approach order, the city will not be able to support the event as the event will have more than 5 people. Port Orchard Municipal Code, Chapter 9.24.050, Section 1G states that the creation of frequent, repetitive, or continuous sounds which emanate from a building, structure, apartment, or condominium which unreasonably disturbs or interferes the peace, comfort, and repose of owners or possessions of real property, such as sounds with musical instruments, audio, sound systems, band sessions, or social gatherings, particularly after 11 p.m. and before 7 a.m., or at any time and place so to unreasonably disturb or interfere with the peace, comfort, and repossess of owners of or possessors of real property, unless so authorized by a special permit issued by the city of Port Orchard. That was pretty tough to say for me. Okay, so the code is not specific as to which department would issue a special permit. On June 4th, 2020, in response to the request from Ms. Waters, Community Development Director Don Bond stated that in absence of delegating authority to a specific department or director, it seems that the special permit would be required by City Council. Therefore, staff is asking direction from the council if they wish to support and approve the noise ordinance permit for July 4th, 2020 on a private property from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. And for the record, I was going to display a map, but it is Office Sydney, and she's literally the last parcel before you hit the county line. On one side of her is the elementary school, and then her property, that the neighbor that we spoke to is in front of her property. That's the one that approved of, didn't have any issues. That staff recommends approving the ordinance for the noise.
Would you like me to put the meeting back in your control?
Sure.
So you can show that map?
Yes.
There you go.
It's in our packet as well.
It's in your packet? Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah,
Fran?
we have it.
Okay, all right. So we don't need to display it then? Okay. I will, questions or comments for Brandy or possibly a motion?
My only comment I would make, and 1 a.m. is pretty late, and fortunately it's only one time a year. It brings back shivers of Howling Wolf, which was just down the road. But there is a house, as near as I can tell, that is located just to the west of their property. And then there appears to be one that's almost directly across the street from, in the map that's attached to us, it's in parcel 1-024. So I know that you reached out to one, but that other one seems awfully close. I wonder if we shouldn't reach out to them as well. Generally, I don't have a problem with the request. It's just, I'd like to make sure that the two neighbors that are close by are both concurring with it.
And there's nothing to prevent, this is a proposed motion. There's nothing to prevent you from changing those times too.
I think the parcels across Sydney are churches.
That's true.
I'm looking across Glenwood Road. It's to the west.
Okay.
Immediately to the west is property. If you're looking at the map that was included,
Right.
1041, that's the house I think we probably contacted. But then if you just go on the other side of Glenwood Road there, 0124 or 024, there's another house right there. So that was the only two.
Right.
If I can mention, I believe that those two houses are owned by the same family, and so it's likely that they at least communicated. And both of those are in the unincorporated county rather than in the city limits.
Oh, they're unincorporated. I don't care. They can tell too. It's still neighbors. But if they're owned by the same property, then I'm fine.
Okay, Councilmember Chang and then Councilmember Rosa Pepe.
John raised a really good point, which is before we can approve a permit, would we do any due diligence to see how many neighbors there actually are, not just the one that the applicant says they spoke to? And I know it sounds like we did talk about it in this case, and we're probably pretty comfortable, but in the future, if we had a noise permit like this, wouldn't we want to give like maybe all the neighbors in 1,000-foot radius or 500-foot radius some kind of notice or ask for their input?
It's kind of expensive.
Well, we
Well-
could require that of the applicant to get some
Okay.
kind of a, but,
Yeah.
you know, I would.
Not a
I
bad
would
idea.
agree.
I agree. Just Fred. Mhm.
Well, we got Councilmember Rosa Pepe, then I'll call on Councilmember Ashby.
John also brought up Howling Wolf, and I remember that because hearing the noise where I live in McCormick Woods was amazing. And, there's no, we don't have any noise ordinance, and I would be more in favor of reducing the time to something like 11 p.m. than possibility of going to 1 a.m., at least for the music portion. That's my 2 cents.
Councilmember Ashby?
I'm going to make a couple of points. One is I agree with Councilmember Rosa Pepe in that I would be more inclined not to take the music to 1 o'clock. I believe our commercial establishments downtown, we have an 11 o'clock cutoff for them. And the other thing is Fred, who had offered about contacting them. We put out some sort of public notice for the events downtown, do we not, Brandy?
We do.
Couldn't we use that particular network? I don't know if we have time because they want to do this on the 4th of July and that's just, a very short time from now. But we do have procedures in place to put out, to seek public comment on events that we're having.
Good point. Councilmember Klassen?
Yeah, and, I appreciate that we don't have a lot of time between her request and when they want to do it. I looked at it from the satellite view of the property, and there's only a couple houses, maybe 3 max in that area. As you'd indicated back across the Sydney, it's a church and vacant piece of ground, and actually it's a couple church if you want to go to the north some. So there's not an awful lot. The property directly to the north is the elementary school. So it's kind of out there with not an awful lot of folks, but there is a couple, 2 or 3 other residents. So I think if we were to do something for future applications that, required them to notify or get some kind of comments from the neighbors, whatever the distance is, that would be helpful in my mind going forward. But because it's so out there and remote, and it's only once, it's not like every weekend, I'll go with whatever the council wants to go with, but I'd be comfortable with the one-time 1 o'clock thing on the 4th.
Okay. Is there a motion? Councilmember Ashby? You're muted though.
Oh, I just wanted to make one last comment, and I don't have any problem approving the noise as long as it's music. I would have a hard time approving it if it were fireworks related.
And I don't know about your house, but on the 4th of July, the fireworks around my house goes until at least 1 in the morning. So
We can't regulate that. So.
I know.
Mayor,
Yes.
I just wanted to make the observation that when we solicit comment downtown, it's usually related to business impacts as opposed to residential impacts. And I live in a neighborhood where we have events like, Halloween and a street festival in the summer, and I just get notice that tells me that it's happening so that I'm aware to make plans accordingly rather than soliciting actual input. And it would not be hard just to send a postcard out. My department could handle it very easily to let the neighbors know what is happening if council decided to approve it, as opposed to asking them if they have comments on it.
Good point.
I think if we notify them, if they have comments, they'll let us know. So I think that's a good compromise personally. Mr. Mayor, with that, I would move to approve the requested permit as presented.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Klassen, a second by Councilmember Cacciardi. Saw Councilmember Rosa Pepe raise his hand.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make an amendment to this to limit it from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Motion to limit the event to 11 p.m. Is there a second?
Our code only goes to 11 p.m. So if it only goes to 11 p.m., a permit is not needed.
Okay. Should basically be denying the permit then, but there is a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second by Councilmember Ashby to the amendment to 11 p.m. As Mr. Bond pointed out, if we did that, we wouldn't need to take this action because it would be allowed outright. So comments are related to the amendment. Councilmember Kuchardi?
Yeah, I think because, again, we wouldn't need this if it was going beyond 11 p.m. I think this person, is trying to be proactive in reaching out to us. It is a one-time event. There's been notification of neighbors. I like the idea of being proactive and notifying others of the event, and I would be supportive of the request for the 1 p.m. and would vote against the amendment.
Okay. Other comments on the amendment? Councilmember Lucarelli.
I also feel that she is doing her due diligence to try to approach this from the right perspective. And she's already hired her bands. We could address this in the future. I don't see any reason why she couldn't go to the 1 a.m.
Okay. Other comments related to the amendment? Councilmember Klassen.
Yeah, I agree with both previous comments that I don't see a one-time event, and she's reached out. We verified with at least the closest neighbor, and apparently they own the same property across. So I don't have nearly the concerns. And again, this is the 4th of July. You're going to have fireworks going off a lot up until, legal until midnight. So I don't see one time is going to make that big a deal.
Yeah, and I'd like to just interject that, I
You
mean,
don't
if
have
this,
Mr.
if
Dorsey.
this, well, just like Nick did, I mean, if this was being held on request for October 10th on a Thursday, that's one thing, but it is going to be over the 4th of July holiday. We have live band out where I live every year. I don't think they get a permit, and it's all day, all night. But between the fireworks and everything that's going on, you don't even notice the music just because it's all about festivity. So, and then if we get a bunch of complaints after this event, then you'll know not to approve it next year.
So Councilmember Rosa Pepe,
I'd like to, if I can, I'll have to ask the mayor. Mayor, I'd like to withdraw my motion.
we withdraw it, or do we need to vote it down? I'm going to go to the.
It can be withdrawn.
Okay. So the
Does
amendment.
the second have to agree?
I believe so. Let's do it just to cover ourselves.
Yeah, the second will agree with the motion maker.
Okay. The amendment has been withdrawn. We're back to the main motion. Before we vote, are there any other comments or questions about the main motion?
Sounds fun.
Okay. None of us got an invite. So, all right. We're voting on an exemption permit for Kristen Waters for a 4th of July celebration. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
We have one nay. Motion passes 5-1. All right, I have a discussion item on the agenda. We tackled that earlier with what I was going to talk about with Mr. Powers. So we can move right into council committee reports. And the Finance Committee hasn't met since our last council meeting, but they are going to meet on July 14th. Economic Development and Tourism, have you met? I see you have a meeting on July 13th. Okay. Well, this is going pretty quick. Utilities, I know you met here recently.
We did, and a great deal of what we talked about was we worked with on the agenda this evening. We talked about the consolidation grant consultant contract being awarded to Parametrics. We're talking about $30,000. We also talked about the next scope and budget for the Marina Pump Station. with 1 million that should be able to cover the design, if I'm reporting this accurately. And also discuss the general sewer plan update, specifically pointing out something with McCormick Woods Lift Station #1, problem with movement in the forced main, and the possible solution that we're going to be working with that. And our next meeting will be actually July 21st. We're meeting right now by remote attendance Zoom at 5 p.m.
Wonderful. Thank you for your report. How about the Sewer Advisory Committee? Did you guys meet?
We met, and I'm asking John to please update.
Yes, we did meet on the 17th. We had a presentation by the district staff on a lot of capital projects that are going on at the plant, and kind of an update. There's a number of things that they have been working on in improvements, from the cast blower replacements, the sluice gates, new fences, a number of things. So they've been pretty active there. And then we went into a, Mr. Rosa, Pepe, that was probably an hour minimum description of the permitting requirements for the plant from ecology, that ecology really doesn't quite understand what the requirements are going to be. But if you folks want a lengthy explanation of what we need to do for turbidity levels and loading, Jay and I are experts now. So we would be happy to share. It would probably take, what do you think, Jay, at least 45 minutes to talk about turbidity levels and the permitting requirements that we're not quite sure what they are. And unfortunately, the plant is unable to achieve goals that they don't know what the goals are. But stay tuned, because hopefully ecology will come up with some definitive guidance on what's going to be required and when. But until then, we are proceeding in the dark without much explanation. Jay, did I miss anything?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I have a request, and John, if you don't feel the same, please let me know. And it's to you, Nick. They were using ERUs that basically I thought they might possibly be low, and I would ask them to kind of to get in contact with you, because to me they might have looked at it as a low, medium, and high possibilities of number of build-up, because it significantly impacted how much capacity they had. Would you agree with that, Dan?
I don't think that's
Yeah, it was basically dependent upon the standards that ecology finally comes down to, will certainly affect the capacity availability in the plant without doing some fairly major expansions. So, again, what they're telling us is that we don't know. Ecology isn't giving us directions other than these are all issues that could have a dramatic effect. And I think that's where Jay indicated we've got the high, medium, and low. However they settle on it, it's going to determine what the capacity of the plan is. So it's a definite maybe.
Yeah. And I think this is in Jackie and Mark's wheelhouse, not Nick's wheelhouse.
Yeah, I would agree. And the only other thing is, we did talk briefly about the city's project on the Marina Pump Station, and gave the district kind of an update on that. And I would close on the report to just simply say, Cindy, you owe Jay and I at least a cup of coffee.
Okay, thank you so much. I had 2 meetings that collided, and I could only attend for part of the time, and it appears I missed a real valuable section, but I will watch the video. Oh, there's no video.
There's no video. You'll have to just sit through Jay and I explaining the formulas necessary for turbidity levels. at
You
the
bet.
plant.
And when I get back, I'll schedule that with you both.
Thank you.
I make a commitment to do that.
I think the only thing I'd like to add is the real dilemma on this nutrient count conversation, which we did prep you all for at our utility
Yes.
committee, really is the reservation certificate debacle that's being created by this nutrient cap, and a plant or a city or a utility district's ability to issue reservation certificates that aren't binding.
Exactly.
So that's a to be continued conversation.
Yeah, you have to give out those commitment letters with the big caveat that ecology could change this.
Kind of goes against growth management, doesn't it? Predictability.
Yes, it does. Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
I have to share you at PSRC and our 2050 visioning exercise. I pushed back long and hard on this, and I did not prevail. Our folks in King County and on Bainbridge Island feel very strongly that this is important stuff, and we all want to protect the sound. But we built a sewer plant to certain capacity, and to change the rules on it later is, I don't think it'd be very just. So, and Jay and John, I understand you going to be asking for extra pay that we can't give you because that meeting went till, I understand, 11 p.m., which is, we would never do that, a committee that long at the city.
I wonder if we couldn't turn it into some COVID funding or something.
Yeah, possible. We'll look into that for you.
At least a cup of coffee.
Okay.
Or better.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Land Use Committee. Have they met? I don't think they have. I see a July 6th date coming up. Transportation met this evening. Councilmember Ashby, do you have a report?
You know, we did meet this evening, and I can give kind of an abbreviated report. I haven't had a chance to really collect thoughts on it, but we discussed our 6 share, we're used to referring to it as our Tier 1 transportation improvement plan, our 6 years. Yeah, we discussed that. We, I believe we're adding one item, and we did some, change some of the descriptions and the titles so that they were clearer for all of us to understand what exactly the project was. We also talked about our transportation impact fees, and not in terms of the projects that would be on that, but Nick did a spreadsheet for us on anticipated revenue and anticipated expenses out of those transportation impact fees. And so it became real clear at looking at that it is important for us to adjust our impact fees. And if we do, we could be in a better position to move forward with some of our projects. We were challenged by the mayor to prioritize projects that we would like to see included in the next biennial budget. And so with that, Jay and I, and Scott was unable to attend, have moved that prioritization process to our next meeting. So and we didn't talk about taking it to a work study. We may want to do that. I'm not sure it's something just for our committee, but it's definitely something that the council would want to look at to make sure we have the right projects moving forward for to make sure they get in our budget. We also reviewed the current McCormick Woods development agreement. We went over specific sections of it and discussed why it would be important to upgrade that agreement. It was written in 2005. And it was originally between the county and Gem 1, who is no longer in ownership, with the project. So we went over how that may be, so that we all understood the contents of that agreement and opportunities to upgrade it and to the benefit of both the city and the residents out there. We also discussed the community development block grant opportunity to bring forward a proposal. And we discussed the perhaps putting our Lippert Drive, is it Lippert Street, Lippert something, between Sydney and Pottery, and doing sidewalk improvements there. And that was where we had the lengthy discussion, is if we got the grant, how are we going to fund the actual completion, the execution of the construction? And it took us into the conversation we had earlier about the other grants. We're putting applications out, we're hoping for success. And if we do have success, then we have to figure out how to fund the completion of it, to actually execute and deploy city resources to complete these projects. So our agenda in July will be very full. And yeah, that was kind of what we talked about today. Jay, would you like to add?
No, I think that was very concise.
Yes, thank you for your report back. I think it captured it all. Good memory. All right, lodging tax. Do we have anything to report there?
Still moving forward with meeting in September, October.
Perfect. Chimes and Lights.
We actually had a wonderful meeting. Our theme for this year is a Merry Musical Christmas. We are looking for a very upbeat celebration. And given that we don't know too much about COVID and what will be happening at that time with social distancing and such, we did think that we could pull off an event that really featured smaller groups of musicians and recorded music if we get into a budget pinch of some sort. So we're moving forward with that. The committee was great with having ideas. We're thinking of maybe a drumming contest for the kids. That would be interesting, but it's outdoors. And some great ideas for music to various stations around the city. And we will continue to have the pet parade and that sort of thing. Moving forward, we're looking at a run. We'll report about what happens in the near future, but it's very promising.
Thanks for your report. Outside agencies, Beck, do you have anything you want to report on for outside agencies?
Oh, let me think. KRCC did finalize the Federal Transportation Awards cycle. What else did we do at that meeting? We had an interesting Transpol meeting discussing the federal awards we just went through, the transportation awards. And moving forward, Luke, we're going to ask our the transportation technical folks to reevaluate what we call the project selection criteria, and perhaps even the scoring mechanisms, bring that back. Transpol also discussed the size of some of the projects that our jurisdictions are experiencing right now. Many of them are larger than the grant funding available through the federal process. We can throw Tremont into that. We all know how hard we had to work to cobble money together for Tremont. And our ask at Tremont was a little outside of the scope for the limited dollars that are available for this federal funding. So we talked about options for different revenue sources. And anyway, and talked about reevaluating the criteria we're using. The particular project that came forward this year was the city of Kingston. It's a Kitsap County request, wants to realign Highway 104 through their city, because ingress and egress off the Kingston Ferry paralyzes their city, and they've got great plans to realign Highway 104, but even phasing it, their first phase is a $5 million ask. And we didn't have $5 million in any one year to be able to award. So it prompted other conversation. And so I thought the LUTAC meeting was particularly interesting. Or LUTAC, the Transpol meeting was particularly interesting. So that's what I have on that.
And Plan Paul met last week. My brain's a bit numb, Nick. We talked about the countywide planning policies and the centers, just dialogue.
Where that one, the important piece coming out of that one, I think, Mayor, is we will be hiring a consultant to do a gap analysis of our countywide planning policies and comparing that to Vision 2050. Our particular LUTAC technical folks, and Nick has been very instrumental in this, have been working on the countywide centers criteria and that section of the CPPs. So there's going to be considerable work at a countywide level for us next year. We have to bring our CPPs, it's the year to update them, and that will prompt us into the transportation funding criteria. So we'll be pretty busy next year in those two areas.
And when Beck mentioned CPPs, it's countywide planning policies, is that acronym. So thank you, Beck, for adding that. Other outside agencies, as you know, I'm the chair of the Public Health Board. That's a gift that just keeps on giving. And we had a special meeting on Friday, and we approved our phase 3 application to the governor's office. They said they wouldn't turn it around as quickly as last time, and we were told a few days. I was taught that a few days is no more than 3. It's been 3 business days, and we still haven't heard anything. So I will say we received 2,300 written comments for that ahead of our action. 60% were for, 30% against, and 10% unsure. I also like to, I read an article today in the Kitsap side regarding Yakima County and things that are going on over there. And I want to thank our community for taking this seriously. People genuinely respect social distancing in our community. We see many people wearing masks where they're needed to wear masks. And from what I read, that's not the case in other places. So I push that. And then today, the governor issued an additional order about masks in public places. I think that will apply. We're going to have to redo the signs we made that said we request masks to require masks now. And there were some stronger and our outdoor public spaces where social distancing can't be observed, the masks will be required also, according to the governor's orders. So that's what I have for outside agencies. My mayor report. Got a few things. I'm sorry. I know it's getting late. I've been in discussions with the downtown merchants and their association about expanding the sidewalks similar to what you read in the paper in Paulsbo. And my recommendation was they had to get consensus from all the merchants that they want to potentially bring the retail out to the sidewalk, maybe take the parking that some view as sacred in front of their businesses, and we would turn that into the sidewalk. And so I just said that for us to consider that, I felt we needed to have consensus from all of the merchants or the majority that they wanted that. So more to come hopefully on that. As we move into phase 3, I just want to share, we're not ready we're getting a lot of requests to resume leasing or lending our public meeting spaces and rooms, and due to the increased cleaning requirements, I just don't think that's prudent at this time. So we're going to be declining those requests, and I think we'll be ready, at phase 4 to address that. We're ready to issue key cards. I have key cards for all the council members. If you want to stop by at your convenience and see me or Brandy. We're collecting because they won't be functional soon, your square key. That's the one that says do not duplicate. from you. So we're trading that for a key card. And to access the building after hours, you'll come in on the north side of the building. And then if you want to come into the finance department, there's another access point there. And then going up to the council chambers, there's another one coming up the back stairwell. So if you want to access any of those in the building 24/7, your cards are active. And on council meeting nights, when we get back to the chambers, the front doors are typically unlocked. But if you're ahead of that, then you'd need to come in that side door. Community center, we conducted consultant interviews a couple weeks ago, and Rice Fergus Miller was the selected firm. And I want to thank Jay and Cindy for dedicating a couple of days to that process and all those interviews. I've got a proposed, Nick and I've been working with them on a proposed scope and contract. We hope to have that scope from them by July 1st. We're going to have another meeting with them internally on July 6th. We plan to bring that to a council work study for your review in July on the 21st. And then hopefully I'll present that to the Public Facilities District Board on the 27th of July, and potentially council approval on the 28th of July. And this process will take us from cradle to grave on 100% design, public outreach, and confirming or looking at other sites also. So confirming what the appropriate site for this project is too. So hope you've noticed our website. Janine and Ryan have put a ton of work into it lately, cleaning it up, new images, putting uniformity to the pages. And I want to shout out to both of those individuals for all the hard work they put. We've had a couple of openings happen in our Public Works department. And I know we've got a hiring freeze, but we just can't, we've got it. So we're posting one of those positions, the entry-level meter reader position. I think that went out today, and we just, somebody's got to read the water meters, and we're just a little too skinny. So we're going to, hopefully we'll have our next round of sales tax data. We definitely have it before we hire that position, but we just felt it was important to move forward. Parking, a couple months back, we talked about, a few months back actually, we talked about designating the north side of Geiger Street next to City Hall for public works vehicles, city vehicles. Then COVID happened, and we kind of forgot about it because there weren't as many people parking in the city lot. Now with people coming back to work, we're being pinched for parking again. So Public Works has ordered those signs, and you'll see changes to the parking standards coming before you at a council meeting in the next sometime in July. So that concludes my mayor's report and director's report. Start with Brandy tonight. Nothing?
I don't think I have anything to report.
Wow. You always go last, so I called on you first.
Thank you.
Okay. And yes, Mr. Bond, the square key still works in your building. We're not doing anything with you yet, but you're at a future phase. Charlie, you got anything for us?
Just the extension of the OPMA proclamation expires the end of this month. And then we'll once again be waiting with bated breath to find out what's our next phase.
It doesn't affect us quite as much. They always seem to do it the 11th hour, and all the other boards I'm on, we have a meeting within a day or two, and it makes everybody nervous.
Mm-hmm.
So Noah, what do you have anything?
I don't have anything tonight.
All right. Mr. Dorsey?
Yeah, I've got a couple things. One is the library repairs are wrapping up, and I think we're on schedule to have the library open up when they reopen the building. So I think everything's on target there. Well 13, the third contract is being advertised. Contract 1 was the well 13 site clearing. The second one was the actual well. This third contract then is the water main work off of Maple Street. So that's going to be on the street soon. And we're finally wrapping up the Bay Street pedestrian pathway, the NEPA update. WashDOT came out with some additional documents, additional work that the council approved last month or the end of the previous month. We should have all that work done the first week in July or so. My hope is that we're back to our right-of-way acquisition process in July, August at the latest.
Thanks for your report, Mark. Nick?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that the survey for the downtown sub-area plan and the county campus plan is live, and we pushed out the link to that on our Facebook page and on the city website. And I would encourage all of you to take a look and tell others about it and encourage them to take the survey.
Thank you. Okay, that's all of our directors. We're to our second public comment period. Mr. McGee, you've hung out all evening. Would you have a comment for the city council? Okay, hearing none. And we have June McCarthy, Cindy's mom. Did you want to grade your daughter's performance this evening? Did she do okay?
She's muted.
She's muted. All right. We
She's
allow her to mute. You've muted her. I see. All right.
Sorry.
We'll ask for that report in writing then.
Well, she's going to have a big birthday in just a day or two.
Okay.
Which is why I'm here.
Wonderful. That's great that you're there to celebrate that with her.
Happy birthday.
Yes. Happy birthday from all of us. All right. That is, we'll close our second citizen comment period. And with that, I believe our meeting is adjourned this evening.
Stay safe.
Yes, everybody do that.
Thank you. Thank you.